Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Demonar here with HYCU. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here. I'm actually joined by my co-host, Alan Holmes.
Greetings, everybody. Good to talk with you today. Thanks for being here.
The focus of today's Demonar is really going to be around disaster recovery to the cloud. We're going to position and kind of show you the reality of what this looks like and then just show you how it works in the product. A couple of housekeeping items. This session will be recorded. If you have any questions, we will address them at the end. If there's too many questions and we don't have enough time, we will make sure to email you personally, answer this question with any resources or additional examples that you may need. Please, if you see the control panel, you can select questions and I will make sure to monitor that. I want to thank you for your time and your attention, but I think we're ready to go. What do you say, Alan?
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So as we mentioned, we're going to do some positioning. Who are we at Haiku? How do we view this evolution of how people are approaching disaster recovery to the cloud? And then we're going to show you how we approach this and how you can see within Haiku Protege. So just a quick about Haiku. We're based in Boston. We have a data protection heritage. Our engineering organization, everyone lives and breathes data protection from backup, DR, mobility. We consider ourselves a hybrid cloud enabler, making sure that we allow organizations to swiftly move and protect workloads on-prem, hybrid, and multi-cloud. We have over 3,600 customers in over 75 countries, and we have strong strategic investments from folks like Cisco, Okta, and additional investments from Bain Capital and A-Crew as well, according to our Atlassian Ventures as well. More than 3,600 organizations rely on us to protect their most sensitive data. The reason this is so important is when we're talking about disaster recovery, the applications that you're failing over are the lifeblood of your organization. And it's crucial that you have a solution and a service that you trust to be able to protect this. These are the organizations that trust us to protect their data as well. With that in mind, just a quick description of what Haiku Protege is, right? It's a single platform to unify data protection for hybrid and multi-cloud. If you go, 10, 15 years ago, everyone in data protection and IT has gone through this evolution of, we have our physical servers that we need to back up. We have our virtualized applications that we need to back up. Hey, we've got to move to the cloud. And now we have this array of applications and services that we need to be able to protect. And just having visibility into all of that is extremely challenging. And that's one of the key priorities of what Haiku Protege is able to do. It's giving you the ability to visualize your protected data, your protected applications across your hybrid and multi-cloud environments in one interface. Now, visibility is one thing, but can you do anything about it? The other element here is management. It's being able to execute backup operations, to be able to protect, to move, and recover data between clouds, and making sure that it is available to you with RTO assurance. Now, we're going to focus today on disaster recovery. But there's so many specific use cases and scenario within data protection that we're able to solve for here at Haiku Protege. There's one that I think is at top of mind for everybody, which is being able to recover from ransomware attacks. Now, one thing is to be able to recover, but the other one is to actually have a service and a platform that is built with a security first architecture. Along with that, we have multi-cloud management, being able to have multiple public clouds to be able to have visibility, to be able to monitor them, to do it without scripts and excessive over architecture, to be able to do it simply policy based. Obviously, migrations to the cloud on premises as well, and being able obviously to talk about backup and recovery. But the focus today is disaster recovery to the cloud. Now, to really understand the value of disaster recovery to the cloud, we have to understand what it takes today to stand up a secondary site, right? This is what DR used to be, where you simply had one primary data center, you had a redundant site where you failed over to, in the case of a DR incident, whether that was a logical failure, whether that was hardware failures, an actual disaster, or even things like ransomware today, right? So if we talk about just what are the infrastructure requirements of this secondary site that most IT organizations were responsible for? Well, you had to stand up your hardware, right? Basic elements here. You had to make sure this is where it really got tricky from a management perspective. You always needed to pay and allocate upfront capacity, both from a storage perspective, but also from a compute perspective to make sure that that site is available and that you can actually make sure that your applications can run on that secondary site while there's a disaster going on. And then you have the everyday elements of the data center, right? Making sure you have a hypervisor, the management tools that come with that, being able to stand up correct networking, firewall infrastructure. And people always forget there's always these tedious things that come with managing a data center as well, like power and cooling. And then you have the actual solutions themselves, right? You always had a DR solution and a backup solution as well. So just in having this secondary site, something that luckily, hopefully, as an organization, you're only using a couple of times. Look at the total cost of ownership, just the resources that have to be allocated to this. Now, think about it. Think about it from a licensing perspective, the support contracts, the certifications your team have to go through, the training, even the professional services, just to make sure that that data center is up and running, it's configured correctly, that it's patched correctly. And now, if we zoom into each of these, you have to think about it from a management cycle, life cycle perspective, right? Let's just talk about backup and DR. Making sure that you have sized and planned correctly and doing so effectively is a tough exercise, and it can be a lengthy one. The installation and configuration, especially when we're talking about hardware appliances, can take weeks for some organizations. And then once you're up and running, then there's the patch management, upgrades, making sure you're addressing any type of issue and known vulnerabilities. And then ultimately comes a hardware refresh or your DR license renewal. And now imagine having to have this type of management lifecycle across your networking, across your data protection infrastructure, your storage, your compute. That's really challenging. And it's not just a pain for you as the person who is responsible for performing DR operations, but it's a pain for the entire IT department and for the entire company. You're allocating a lot of time just on the assessment and the planning required to both build and maintain a secondary data center, but also your time as an administrator, as an engineer, as an IT manager to have to be responsible for all of these. There are only so many hours in the day. And then there's even financial and operation elements as well. So what we can see here is, in the past, you only had this option. You can do this or use a service provider who was also doing this as well. But that's where things change with having the public cloud available to you and having such growth and maturity in what the public clouds like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud have provided. So what does this look like on HYCU, right? We've seen this exercise where you have a secondary site. What does it look like today if you are a HYCU customer and you would like to perform failovers to the public cloud? Well, ultimately, one, you have your license, your protege license, where you are using this for backup, DR, and migration. Right? So you are already consolidating one single interface to be able to perform file restores, to be able to perform a failover, and a migration as well if you want to lift and shift. You're already consolidating several different or disparate tools into one single experience, one single licensing structure. And the best part about this is that you're only paying for what you actually need at the time in which you need it. You have on demand DR storage and compute. You do not have to have any type of upfront capacity management when it comes to a secondary site. And then ultimately, it's simply making sure that you've selected a cloud target, that you've configured this correctly, and that you're ready to go and that you've tested this. So what this means is it's a drastic change in the management lifecycle. With HYCU Protege, you can be up and running in minutes. You're paying as you go. You have minimal sizing exercises, and you're not doing any of the upgrades or maintenance yourself. This is a managed service. And ultimately, it is built to make sure that your team doesn't have any type of learning curve requirements. So, from a resource, from a time, from a labor perspective, Haiku brings one click simplicity. The fact that you're able to perform very sophisticated operations, whether it's assigning backup policies or performing a failover to very simple experiences, is crucial. Failovers are seamless. As we mentioned again, you have complete visibility and one interface for DR, for backup, for migrations. IQ is also built with multi-tenancy in mind and with self-service. So you're even able to offload a lot of these responsibilities, especially if you're in a large organization. So with that in mind, before we get to this demo and actually see the magic happen and how Alan's going to show us how this works, one of the things that we have to remember about Haiku Protege is we have never settled. Most organizations will have a solution that was very successful on-prem, maybe for virtual machines. And they simply add agents and plugins to this and make sure that it's good enough to work in the public cloud. But that's not what we did. One, we wanted to make sure that if you're using the public cloud, because of the operational benefits, because it's infrastructure as a service, Why is your data protection solution not also as a service? We've built this with simplicity, but my favorite part about this is that it was purpose built. Whether you are in a Nutanix environment, VMware, Dell PowerScale, it was built for those platforms. We dedicated the investment and the engineering resources to do so, so that you do not have agents, plugins, and all the operational and performance impacts that comes with that. Everything that we do is application centric, and ultimately it's up to you to choose what infrastructure you want. We are storage agnostic, we are platform agnostic. It is simply a software service that allows you to protect wherever it goes. But ultimately, and we're backed by an NPS of 91 with industry leading support. But ultimately, these are just words. And there's nothing better than seeing the product in action and seeing how easy it is to use and to manage on every day. So with that, I will transition over to Alan to really show you the value of HYCU Protege.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. Let me kind of make sure that we're zeroing in on that, utilizing public cloud as your essentially your DR location kind of functionality here, and that's what I want to focus on. So what you're looking at here is basically the HYCU Protege platform management screen. And so as you can see, we've got essentially capabilities of protecting data in multiple environments. So we've got your on-premise environments running, VMware, Nutanix, and so forth. And then, of course, all three public clouds, Office 365. Basically, wherever your data is going to be kept. We've got solutions to protect that data, and it's all managed through this Protege platform. And so, in order to kind of facilitate this, utilizing the public cloud as your DR location from your on-premise data center, I kind of want to zero in on the enterprise cloud piece to start with. So let's kind of dive into what that on-premise virtual appliance controller looks like. So very similar, obviously, from an interface standpoint. The first thing you're going to want to do when you get that virtual appliance deployed in your data center is basically to come in and connect up to sources. Basically, where are we getting the data that you want to protect from your Nutanix environment, from your VMware environment, from your Dell Isilon physical machines, things like that, and basically connect us to them. And that will allow us to then discover that environment that you're looking to protect. We'll display it for you to utilize. But the second piece here is going to be to define what public cloud environment you're going to be utilizing for that kind of DR on demand functionality. So you'll enter essentially account IDs, service principals, service accounts, things like that for AWS, Azure, and or Google into HYCU so that we can facilitate that migration, that kind of DR functionality. Those are the two key pieces, basically making a connection between HYCU and your on-premise environment and HYCU and your cloud environment. So with that, we'll come into virtual machines here. You'll be able to see that we've connected to our on-premise vCenter, on-premise Nutanix environments, physical servers, things like that, and being able to just display everything that we see from what you pointed us to. So that effectively covers what we're looking to protect. Now, for that DR functionality, you don't necessarily have to essentially sign everything to that. You can, VMs, if you got 200 of them or something like that, but you're declaring that 15 of them, 20 of them are considered mission critical, that the organization can't function without these, and these are the ones that I want to absolutely make sure are capable of that kind of migration, that spin up functionality in the cloud. That's what these little icons show. These are the ones that are essentially ready and available for that functionality into Azure, into AWS, into Google. Everything else, we can certainly back up and recover on premise to recover to your local environment, or however you want to facilitate that. But these are the ones that we're going to be focusing on today from that DR functionality standpoint. So we've kind of covered the what. Where is we're going to write the data, and this is where we've got the sourced information. You've already pointed us to your cloud environment. We've pointed us to your on-premise environment. Where are we going to write this data? HYCU offers a lot of flexibility here. Most people will use a combination of on-premise NAS type storage or something, so that you've got something on site that's quick recovery. You don't have to pull data across a LAN connection. You don't have to deal with egress fees if you're utilizing public cloud, things like that, so that you can recover. So we'll basically connect up to whatever our storage is going to be. Tell us what that is. Is it NFS, SMB? Is it HYCU? Do you have an S3 appliance? However you want to work that. So basically point us to that. For your on-premise storage, we'll create that connection, but then we'll also connect to our cloud storage. So in whatever public cloud you're using, you're going to define, Amazon S3 storage, Azure Blob, Google storage bucket, whatever, and simply reference that here in HYCU. So I'm going to use Google Cloud just because it's what I'm most familiar with. It's pretty common, but this is true for all three public clouds. Basically connect this to whatever the storage is. You've already had your cloud account defined up here in HYCU. We're going to connect to it. So now I've got HYCU installed. I can see my source environment. I'm connected to my cloud environment. I've got my storage defined on-premise. I've got my storage defined out in the cloud. How we tie all these pieces together is through our policy-based approach of data protection. So we're going to come in here. We'll give this policy a name, and essentially what we're going to define is different policies that speak to the criticality of the resources we're trying to protect, right? So I'm going to say that a particular group of VMs require once a day backup. The expectation from the organization is that they're recoverable within 4 hours. If we have to do that from an on-premise copy of the data, we're going to retain it for 2 weeks, and then we're going to write it to some sort of a local storage. And I'm just going to pick Synology. Who doesn't love a good Synology? And that's it. We'll apply this policy to whatever VMs is appropriate. We are now going to take backups of those resources and write them to your local on-site storage. You want to get a copy of that data out to that cloud environment so that you can utilize that data for recovering your VM or VMs in that public cloud environment. We'll simply select the copy option, come down here and say, I want you to also send a copy of my data out to my Google Cloud storage. Retain it out there for a different period of time. So keep it 2 weeks on site, 6 weeks in the cloud, however you want to work that. And what we're going to do is after we're finished writing that back up to whatever your local storage is, we give you the green light, VM's protected, everything's done, good to go. We will send basically a copy of that data in the background off to whatever the second storage is out to your public cloud environment. So now I have identical copies of my data essentially from an on-premise standpoint and out in the cloud. Fantastic. Just two things to note here. Number one, if you want to use cloud as a primary target, we can absolutely do that. It's just that, obviously from a recoverability standpoint, if you do need to do VM recovery, file recovery, you do run the risk of egress fees and things like that. And, a little bit maybe latency issues if you've got a slower internet connection or something like that. But most people we see write local and then copy out to the cloud. The second thing I want to note is that at no time here in any of this have I set up anything in your cloud environment from a HYCU standpoint. I haven't deployed any gateway servers, repository servers, data movers, virtual appliances running in the cloud. There's nothing in HYCU world from a compute standpoint that we have to run in your cloud environment, which means that you aren't paying for some virtual appliance to sit there and listen for something bad to happen. All we're doing is natively integrating with the cloud storage that you've pointed us to, and that's it. We don't have anything that you have to install in your cloud environment, which just makes it a really cost-effective solution because then you're only paying for it when you need it, right? Okay, great. So we've covered that. We've got all our pieces connected now. We're backing up our data locally. We're sending copies out to the cloud. I have my cloud accounts defined. Let's come and take a look at this particular VM right here, which we show is ready for that Google Cloud migration. We've got all of our little pieces here with respect to different restore points I have available to me. I can see whether I have my initial Synology backup, I have my offsite copy out to the cloud, and actually over here, we're even showing compliance, whether or not we're meeting the requirement of once-a-day backups, 4-hour recovery, whatever it was that you defined in that policy. But on top of that, under this backup status, and I know this is very small, so you'll have to trust me that it says this, in the lower right-hand corner there, it does show that we wrote the data to a Synology storage and we sent the copy out to Google. Fantastic. Time to recover. Something bad has happened. We need to recover. We're going to select a particular restore point. You can restore the entire VM locally back into your on-premise virtual environment. We can do individual file restores. If the environment's still up and running and no issues there, I just need some particular directories restored, applications restored, things like that. We can do the file level type recovery. But what we're talking about here now is something has happened. We've declared the on-premise version of this VM to be unusable. I need to get this VM running up in my DR environment, which is public cloud. So rather than doing restore VM or files, we're going to actually say spin this VM up to the cloud. And we're going to tell it that when in my Google environment, basically if you've got multiple cloud accounts or projects, if you've got different subscriptions in Azure, things like that, you can select which one or ones you want to do here. If you're dealing with some sort of a local or regional outage, you can even tell it, I want you to bring this up in some other data center around the world. You want to throw it up in Europe somewhere, or West Coast, East Coast. Basically, just tell us where you're going to be bringing that resource online. And then we just simply ask some questions about the VM that you want to provision. We do a quick little test on the current configuration from your local environment and make a best guess in terms of guessing similarity in terms of machine type that you want to bring on in the cloud. You can override that and select, over and under provision, however you want to work it, change CPU and memory. Also, if you've got multiple network connections you need to set up, you can connect to the various networks that you've already defined in your cloud environment. And then we just need to give it a name that the environment likes, and we hit spin up. So what we're going to do at this point, as soon as you hit that spin up button, is utilizing the connections that you've defined here in our cloud account. This is where HYCU will actually deploy something into your compute engine area in your cloud environment. So what we'll do is provision a small preemptible worker node instance that will spin up. We'll actually connect to the cloud storage that you've been dutifully writing all of your on-premise backups to. We'll take that restore point you selected, we'll read it in from that cloud storage and instantiate a VM in whatever cloud environment you're running in. When that VM is up and running, our little worker node shuts itself off and destroys itself so that you're no longer having to deal with anything from HYCU perspective running. And now that machine has essentially migrated up into the cloud environment. You now can deal with whatever's happening on site, triaging the environment, getting things back up and running, however you want to get that working again. Come time that the crisis has been averted and you're ready to bring that machine back down from your public cloud environment back into your on-premise, we have the exact reverse process. So essentially, pointing to your public cloud, tell us again, which account or projects you might be using. Select the virtual machine that you're looking to bring back. Select from whatever list. We'll show you the different checkpoints, the different restore points we have available, and then you just tell us, put it back in my my local installation, particular storage volume, give it a new name, connect it to different networks or whatever, and then we'll hit the spin up button from there. And we'll effectively then just take that data that's sitting in the cloud, we'll send a copy of that machine back across the wire, back into your on-premise environment, powered on, and now that machine has effectively migrated back. So I know that was kind of a whirlwind tour. It's probably a lot of questions regarding that, but that's essentially the idea behind being able to use public cloud as a DR kind of location, DR standby location that you can bring on as needed. Some people will even do their DR testing in this. So rather than having to use it for an actual disaster, they'll maybe run, every 3 months or something like that. They'll actually bring portions of their environment up using HYCU to do their kind of DR testing. Can we recover from this? So at any rate, I hope that was a decent overview and that I didn't go through it too fast. But that's HYCU Protege using public cloud as a DR. So comments, questions, concerns, anything at this point, Andy, that we've got?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave this QR code. So there's nothing better than trying this for yourself. You're able to access a free trial in doing so. And now let's make sure that we address all these questions as well. We'll leave that up here as well. So one question, obviously, I talked a lot about licensing. I talked about a lot of the cumbersome approaches of the licensing on-prem. But Alan, and from your perspective, so how is HYCU Protege licensed?
Good question. So from an on-prem standpoint, I mentioned, organization, again, let's say you've got 200 VMs, you're utilizing the on-premise storage or on-premise licensing of either VM-based or socket-based on the clusters that we're protecting. For Protege to have that spin-up functionality, there is an add-on license and it's a per VM, and that's so that you don't have to license all your environment if you don't want to. As far as anything licensed within from HYCU perspective in your public cloud, there isn't anything unless once you migrate that VM to whatever public cloud you're utilizing, you want to use HYCU and the cloud service that we provide for whatever it is, Azure, AWS. If you want to use HYCU to back up those VMs that you've migrated to the cloud temporarily to keep those backups running, there's a capacity-based license that's available for that you can use if you want to.
Absolutely, appreciate that. Here's also an interesting question as well, because I think it'll speak to the simplicity of HYCU. But the question is, do you provide a service to set the platform up on a customer environment? Is this a paid service or included?
So our customer success team, basically, when you get onboarded, we've got some scary smart people that that'll help kind of walk you through this and help get it set up. And on top of that, Andy, you talked about the NPS score earlier. Um, you know, our support folks in my experience have gone above and beyond. I have almost quarter century of IT sysadmin, network admin type experience, and having to deal with support teams was one of the most painful experiences usually. But I've since coming over to HYCU about 2 years ago, kind of leaving the IT world and coming here to HYCU, I've actually sat in on customer calls and listened to the support, listen to the support calls with them. And I've never met a group of people who take offense more personally to you not being able to get something to work with the software. They do a really good job of kind of owning that and making sure that you're happy when you're done. So we've got folks that'll help you with that. But honestly, it's not terribly difficult to get this stuff working on your own too if you feel adventurous. So.
Perfect. I appreciate that. That was a passionate answer. 'Cause it's true. I can attest to that as well.
Yeah.
It's before you join, you're like, I don't, everyone says that, and then you actually see it. And so, one, you have a very easy to use service, software only, right? No hardware
Mm-hmm.
installations, but you also have a group of people who are there to help you throughout the whole thing. One question I had for you as well was, we've talked a lot about to the cloud. But in reality, if you're protecting, for example, EC2 instances in the cloud, outages are still a thing. What what does Haiku Protege offer in that arena? Not on-prem to cloud, but protecting native EC2.
Sure. So, and it's true of all three. You talked about AWS for sure, but we do have native services that are purpose built, purpose written. Kind of Andy, as you were referring to, we start with a clean sheet of paper. They're native subscription services that can protect those instances running in Google, running in Azure, running in AWS. And again, we don't deploy anything in your environment, and that's something that we can certainly, if anybody wants to see this, it's essentially a subscription service that we manage the management plane. You getting access into the management plane through your IAM credentials for whatever cloud provider you're using. And then through those same service accounts, so when we set it up, basically connecting your cloud accounts, those same service accounts, we can protect those EC2 instances, AWS VMs, Azure VMs, Google instances, things like S3 buckets and Google buckets and things like that. We can basically protect all that in the same manner without any of that data ever leaving your tenant, your subscription, your project, whatever it is that in those different cloud environments. So we definitely have purpose-built solutions for all three of those as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Alan. I think we're only going to have time for one more question. I see a couple questions here more on licensing, on IP addresses, usual suspects, really. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that Alan and I will email you. But one more question we have too is any limitations, Alan, on the size of VMs that could be sent to the cloud?
Not from a HYCU standpoint. No, I mean, obviously you try and shove a lot of stuff through a small pipe. It may take a little longer, but no, we don't have any kind of a. We've got actually one customer we were working with was dealing with I want to say it was close to 3 terabyte or something like that SQL database that they were migrating, and they would test that every 3 months. They essentially spin that thing up just to make sure it still worked. And so I haven't encountered anything. So nope, I would say there's no limit there.
Perfect. Thank you. So everyone, we will make sure today to answer your questions, but I want to thank you all for your time, your attention today. We'll make sure to also send this on-demand webinar that you have access to it, but we're very appreciative of your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.